Since the first presidential election in 1788, there have been many important and interesting presidential elections, but there have also been many uninteresting and boring elections too. These include the 1820 election in which James Monroe ran without opposition during the era of good feelings, the 1936 election where Franklin D. Roosevelt easily defeated Alf Landon, who had not even campaigned during the election, the 1994 election in which Ronald Reagan landslide against Walter Mondale, and the 1996 election with Bill Clinton was always ahead and Bob Dole never stood a chance of winning. The 1904 election was one of these boring elections. Theodore Roosevelt, who had assumed the presidency following the assassination of William McKinley, easily defeated Democratic nominee Alton B. Parker, who was only a judge from New York. Parker only received support from the Solid South but lost Missouri, making Roosevelt the first Republican since 1868 to win the state. However, this was almost the most interesting election in American history. Roosevelt had won the Republican nomination without opposition, but this was almost not the case. Mark Hanna had wanted to challenge Roosevelt for the nomination but had died on February 15, 1904. Who was Mark Hanna, you may ask? Hanna was a political kingmaker for over 20 years and played a major role in the election of multiple presidents. He started as a kingmaker at the presidential election in 1880, according to Senator Charles W. F. Dick.
Mr. Hanna had as much to do with the election of Mr. Garfield as any single individual in the country.
In 1884, he attempted to have the Republican Party nominate Senator John Sherman, but he was defeated by James Blaine. He served as a major fundraiser for Benjamin Harrison in the 1888 election. Hanna first met William McKinley in the 1870s, and by the Harrison presidency, he realized that he couldn't run Sherman again in 1896. He chose to push McKinley for the presidency, and he staged plans for McKinley's 1896 campaign in 1892. He served as McKinley's campaign manager in both 1896 and 1900. While Hanna was a man of the Golden Age and shouted in its general corruption, he was restrained for asking for political appointments. He even declined a presidential appointment from McKinley to the cabinet. He instead focused on winning a seat in the United States Senate, which he did in a controversial 1898 election. Following McKinley's assassination, Hanna had worked with Roosevelt, including playing a role in the building of the Panama Canal, but there were rumors of him wanting to run for president. Roosevelt offered to have Hanna manage his re-election campaign as a way to get him out of the race. J.P. Morgan even offered to finance Hanna's presidential campaign. However, these rumors ended on February 15, 1904 with Hanna's death. Alton B. Parker, while the Chief Judge of New York's highest court, had a rather uninteresting career. Irving Sun wrote in They Also Ran, which was published 39 years after the election and 17 years after Parker's death, that nobody had written a biography on Parker. Despite Parker's blandness, there were initially much more interesting characters for the presidential nomination. Parker was actually never intended to be the first choice. William Jennings Bryan, who had ran in 1896 and 1900, were considered candidate but declined to run. Former President Grover Cleveland was considered candidate but declined too. Parker had supported Bryan during both of his campaigns, but Bryan disliked Parker for support of the gold standard. Bryan instead seconded the nomination of Francis Cockrell. Out of the many other candidates that ran, Cockrell stands out not only for support from Bryan, but due to the fact that he had served as a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. The only major opposition Parker faced during the balloting was from William Randolph Hearst, who does not need introduction. However, for those who don't know him, he was a short rundown. He was a major newspaper publisher, well known for his yellow journalism, sensationalism, and his role in calling for the Spanish-American War. Hearst was also active in electoral politics, with him being elected to the United States House of Representatives in 1903 to 1907. He also ran for mayor of New York twice, and for governor in 1906. He also headed two political parties and was a member of the Protestant movement, although he later became an extremely conservative. At the National Convention, Hearst placed a distant second to Parker, but still received 181 delegate votes. This quote from Hearst himself is a good summation of him.
You can crush a man with journalism!
So imagine this, an election between Mark Hanna, a massively corrupt local kingmaker and a leader of political machinery, running against William Randolph Hearst, one of the most infamous newspaper publishers. This election will be changed from a simple landslide by a incumbent president against some unknown judge from New York to a great battle between political machines and wealth. Of course, no matter the winner of the election, the United States would suffer, and it better for us that we got the boring election instead of this election.